Hello and welcome to the Election Corner on One Man Think Tank. Today we're going to be reviewing my 2020 presidential election prediction map. I will be using my last prediction, official prediction, which was released, I believe, the week before Election Day. And this is not it. This is the final election map, which, as you can see, contains the seats that they have been called by the AP, the Associated Press, while leaving those which have been uncalled, leaning the directions the vote counting seems to be going in. So as you can see, Joe Biden has won the presidency, most likely, with 3 states still leaning his way, Nevada, Georgia, and Pennsylvania, while Donald Trump has lost, though he will still probably gain North Carolina and Alaska. Ironically enough, Donald Trump will only gain 232 electoral votes, the exact same amount Hillary Clinton got in 2016, while Joe Biden gets 306. So we'll have to see Trump's claims about this number after he last claimed that 306 was the largest number of votes any president had received since Reagan. This claim was in fact inaccurate, but that's not shocking. So, let's take a look at my map and yeah. Okay. So you can see the obvious part here. Down south, very, very blue, with some spots of lighter red. Now, I've got quite a few things we're going to go through here, so stick with me. I will touch on most things. And while I'm doing this, I'm going to update my map with the if I had this information going forward. Now, I'm going to make a really key note here. This does not mean I'm going to go, oh, well, if I had known how it turned out on Election Day, naturally I would have called it perfectly for Election Day. I will probably not match up my votes correctly here, especially looking at you, North Carolina. But what I'm doing here is showing you how my maps will be updated in the future to handle this, so you can, when inevitably 2024 comes around, or more importantly, 2018, you can have a better feeling of what adjustments I'm making. So let's start with the most obvious one. Texas and Florida. I called those both toss-ups, but tilt Democratic. This call came from one big thing. Now, if you recall correctly, I was very, very, very bearish on Florida for the Democrats up until basically this call, so I'm a little bit peeved with myself about that. But essentially it came down to I knew Democrats needed to get a little bit better than a 3-point margin in the polls to be ahead in Florida. That's what it had happened in 2016, 2012, 2018, I believe 2014, I checked. And 3 points. Joe Biden managed to start getting about 4 points, so I felt a little bit more bullish towards him, so I flipped it to blue. Wished I had left it red. I actually, so we'll get back to my baseline in Florida in a moment, especially when we cover Iowa. But the key point here between Texas and Florida, and a lot of people did this, not blaming other people or writing myself off as saying, well, everyone messed up. We failed to separate Southwest Latinos and Southeast Latinos. And that's really just based on origin. So those who live in the Southeast, and I'm including chunks of Texas here, are historically from Cuba, Venezuela, and they are very frightful of the term socialist and will naturally be more likely to vote for Republicans. While in the Southwest, while there are more immigrants from Mexico and Central America there, we also have the key point of this territory used to be Mexican, and there are many ancestral Latinos who lived there before the U.S. Took over the territory. So you end up with different voting patterns than recent, or I will refer to them as short-term, second or third generation immigrants. These guys have fought a lot harder to preserve their identity, and thus are less likely to blend into American culture and become quote-unquote white, or whatever, as their identity, than it is in especially Florida. So if I had known this information, I'll be honest, I would have moved Florida back to tilt, and this is just on the Latino information. I wouldn't have touched Texas, though that is the reason Texas didn't flip. The Rio Grande Valley really, really needed to turn out high. That's a heavy Latino area for the Democrats, and it didn't. That's really on the Democrats for not running a more get out the vote, Spanish-speaking campaigns and such. I think they should have put Julian Castro on Mark in Texas, and we really stopped hearing from him after the primary. I'm not sure why, but they should have tried to get him to go down there. Maybe if he had been on the Senate ticket, it might have saved Texas for Joe Biden. But either way, just with the Latino information, Florida goes back to tilt red. But this leads into two other points that are just good to know. One, Democrats can't take Latinos for granted. See what happened in Florida and what happened in Texas, and technically Nevada and Arizona. But also, they can't take African Americans for granted. They won Wisconsin, Michigan, Philadelphia, and definitely Georgia off the backs of African Americans turning out to vote, showing up, and casting their ballots. Democrats now have a core suburban white base, a baseline, not base, baseline, that they can rely on, but they need to turn out African American votes if they want to win elections. My next big lesson I learned is the fact that Iowa, Florida, and Ohio are now red states. If you paid attention to me, if you've been with me a long time, if you've paid attention to me, if you've been with this channel a long time, you know, for a long time I've been saying Iowa's a red state, Florida is basically a red state, and Ohio is a red state. And then I got caught up in the election fervor with the polls and went, well, maybe they are still purple. Maybe they are. This is their last chance. They all failed. They're all red states. And with that information, I would have left Florida as tilt Republican, Ohio as tilt Republican, and Iowa as likely Republican. That's on me. Speaking of Republican counties, and further Republican calls I made, Missouri, Montana, and Alaska, why are they likely? Well, simply they all had decent polls for Joe Biden and had popular Senate candidates that I thought could help narrow the margins. And they did. In all of these states, Joe Biden has narrowed the margin from 2016, and in, I believe, the case of Alaska, might be narrowing it from 2012, though I'm not sure. But it comes down to, and a lot of the calls I made, especially for like Texas and Missouri and such, came from Democrats need to run an exciting candidate. I thought Joe Biden, for whatever reason, was managing to fill that niche, despite the fact he wasn't. And hence why these states were in play. If I had honestly thought a bit more, because these were all last-minute calls based off of what I interpreted as excitement for the Democrats and excitement for Joe Biden, I would have actually moved these states all back to red. I wouldn't have flipped them anyway, so that's on me. From now on, I need to judge the excitement for a candidate, and this is really important, because there are 6 ways you can vote, despite there being, really, only 2 candidates on the ticket. You can vote for the Republican, for Donald Trump, against the Democrat, against the Republican, for the Democrat, or for Joe Biden. No matter how you voted in this election, or didn't vote, you picked one of those. I know plenty of people who voted against the Republican or for the Democrat, but not for Joe Biden. And that is really telling, and that's on me for not making that, for not realizing that would play a bigger part. Next, and this is a little bit with Ohio, big part down in Georgia and North Carolina and the like, I needed to assume that, how can I put this? I assumed undecideds either wouldn't turn out or would split 50-50, which was the wrong move to make. Instead, what I need to do is call undecideds for whoever the incumbent is, no matter what. That would have cleared up a lot of things. It's not going to change my map at all, because based on the numbers we saw, all of the information, it wouldn't have changed any of the information I had, but it would have been important. And while we're making some calls, Nebraska's 2nd District and Maine's 2nd District, those actually, as you can see, I got both of those wrong. But they evened out. And what that came down to, and I'm not sure how I would correct this in the future because I don't really regret doing this, but I'm letting you know why I made these mistakes. I looked at the congressional races for those districts because I was having trouble finding information for the individual districts. So instead of doing Maine's 2nd District for Joe Biden, I did Maine's 2nd District for Golden, who's the incumbent, and Nebraska's 2nd District for, I can't remember the candidate's name off the top of my head, but the incumbent Republican. But yeah, both of these flipped for the presidential level, flipped for the presidential level, but voted differently at the state house for their incumbent House representative. So that's on me. That's why that happened. Another note, Georgia and North Carolina are now clearly purple. Far and away, clearly purple. This was becoming pretty clear in 2018. It's shining now. This won't change how I mark them down, but they are clearly purple now. Next up, I do not regret saying Wisconsin, Michigan, and Pennsylvania are likely blue. At the beginning of the night, we had the red mirage effect, and if the votes were counted in a different order, everyone would be talking about how screwed Donald Trump was from the very beginning and how this was a stunning indictment. As we're going now, the lowest state's margin will probably be Wisconsin, I believe, which has about a 2% lead for Joe Biden, 1 to 2%. That's more than safe, in my opinion. That's Donald Trump putting on his best showing and still losing by 2 points. All of these states are likely. I do not regret those calls. Another note, that's not going to affect my map because I was pretty bullish on these, but New Hampshire and Arizona are red at the presidential level. A federal level, not even presidential, federal level. For all of their federal races, they went blue, and that in especially statewide federal races, I should clarify. And while at the state level, they both went red. And that says to me we're looking at split ticket. Both these states will be viewed as purple. Republicans will view them as pickups, but frankly, for the federal level, both of these states are blue, and I'm going to treat them as blue as a default. From now on, I can't make them any more blue. Then I'd mark them down right now. But that's a good note for the future. Another key point is mail-in ballots, and this is what screwed me in Texas. Mail-in ballots do not equal Democratic support, especially in red states. Texas is getting purple. It's not fully purple. And mail-in ballots, I assumed, would be increased Democratic support, and it did. However, it also increased Republican support, because now everyone just got a ballot and could mail it in. So there are a lot more people who, remember how I listed those 6 options before? Who decided to vote for the Republican. Not necessarily for Trump or some against the Democrat, but a lot just went, oh, I'll vote Republican. That was a big factor I wasn't expecting, especially in new voters. I thought new voters would flip Texas. And that is the one metric that really screwed me up in Texas. Knowing what I do now, would I make a different call on Texas? Maybe, but I feel like I wouldn't, and that's due to one other reason. The Democrats are definitely a midterm party now. We'll have to watch 2022, because that was 2022, not 2020 as well, because that's going to be the big decider. Democrats seem to have tightened their grip on suburban voters, and that could very well, in the midterms, really benefit them, because they used to be the reliable voting bloc for Republicans. Now, if they're for the Democrats, we could very well see the Democrats improving their margins in traditionally red states, such as Texas, such as Georgia, such as North Carolina, heck, maybe even Florida, and that could change the current status quo of the country. And lastly, this didn't affect this race, but split ticket voting, I assumed it would happen both for the Republicans and for the Democrats. It only happened for the Democrats. So a lot of people voted straight red down the ballot. A lot of people went blue, then red for the rest of the ballot. And that, while not affecting any of the presidential results, did cause me to overpredict states like Ohio and Texas and Florida for swing voters. That would go, well, I don't want to vote for Trump, so I'll vote for Biden, or I won't vote, but then I'll vote red down the ticket. Those votes still went to Trump. And my last call, looking at this map, looking at the turnout, looking at how all of this went down, my last call is the GOP needs Trump. He managed stupidly high voter turnout for them. Like, this was not just a blue wave, there was a red wave. Both, they collided. Democrats came out on top, as you're seeing, and given the margins in a state like Georgia, barely a decisive victory for the Democrats, just barely. Still decisive, but barely. If Trump isn't on the ballot, let's say, hypothetically, in this, let's say instead Trump had said he wasn't going to run or died and we had Mike Pence. My original prediction, where Florida was tilt blue, Ohio was tilt blue, Ohio was tilt red, and a couple more states were competitive, I think would have been a lot more accurate. Because Trump turned out so many voters. We saw a red wave hit a blue wave. And while there are some adjustments I could have made, as you can see, my prediction still thought Texas was going to go blue, and North Carolina. With that being said, it's still a very bad map for Republicans without Trump. The margins in Texas got narrowed, even with massive voter turnout. If there was turnout like that and Trump wasn't on the ballot, that could have cost him Texas. That definitely would have cost him North Carolina. Florida would have been contentious. Ohio, Iowa, all would have been contentious, and we probably would have known these states a lot faster. So, with all that being said, if you like the video, drop a like down below, and also feel free to leave a comment, say how you feel things could have been changed or improved. Curious to hear what you guys have to say. If you want to see more from the channel, click the subscribe button and the notification bell to be alerted when new content is released. And if you want to hear more from me outside of YouTube, I do have a Twitter, at OneManThinkTan1, the Roman numeral, link in the description. And, most importantly, have a wonderful day.